A big, busy airport full of noise and people. Travelers are running with their suitcases, trying to catch their flights. Families are hugging and saying goodbye, some with happy smiles, some with tears in their eyes. Kids are laughing, pulling their little backpacks on wheels. Everyone is moving fast, like bees in a hive, buzzing around. But in one quiet corner, away from all the action, there's a man sitting all by himself. He's not running. He's not talking. He's just sitting. This man looks different from everyone else. His clothes are old and torn, like they've been worn 100 times. His pants have holes at the knees, and his shirt is faded, with stains that won't wash out. He's got a big, worn-out hood pulled over his head, so you can't even see his face. It's like he's hiding from the world. People walk past him, but they don't stop. They don't look. To them, he's just another homeless guy. Just someone who doesn't belong in a fancy airport full of shiny suitcases and clean shoes. But here's the thing: what if I told you, this man is not what he seems? What if I told you he's hiding a secret so big, so huge, it could change everything? A secret that not even the tough airport cop yelling at him knows about. Stick around, because the story is about to get wild. Let's call this man Jake. That's not his real name, but for now, it's what we'll use. Jake sits on a hard, cold bench in the airport, his hands deep in his pockets. He's trying to stay invisible, like a shadow no one notices. Around him, the airport is loud. Announcements blare over the speakers, telling people where to go. Babies cry. Wheels on suitcases squeak. But Jake stays quiet. He watches the world go by, but he doesn't say a word. Why is he here? Where is he going? And why is he dressed like that? Those are questions we'll answer soon, but not yet. For now, just know this: Jake is not like anyone else in that airport. Not even close. Now, let's zoom out and look at the people around Jake. There's a mom with 2 kids, rushing to their gate. She glances at Jake, but quickly looks away, pulling her kids closer. There's a businessman in a sharp suit, talking loudly on his phone. He walks right past Jake, not even noticing him. And then, there's a group of teenagers, laughing and taking selfies. One of them points at Jake and whispers something to the others. They giggle, then hurry away. To all of them, Jake is just a nobody. Just a problem they don't want to deal with. But what if they're wrong? What if Jake is someone important, someone special, hiding in plain sight? Here's where things start to get interesting. Across the airport, a big, tough airport cop is walking around. His name is Officer Daniels. He's tall, with a shiny badge on his chest and a loud voice that makes people turn their heads. Officer Daniels likes being in charge. He likes telling people what to do. And when he sees Jake sitting there in his torn clothes, he doesn't like it one bit. To Officer Daniels, Jake doesn't belong here. This airport is for travelers, for people with tickets and fancy bags, not for someone who looks like, well, like Jake. Officer Daniels stomps over to Jake, his boots making loud thumps on the floor. People start to stare. Hey, you, he yells, pointing a finger at Jake. What are you doing here? This isn't a place to sleep. This is an airport, not a park bench. His voice is loud, so loud that everyone nearby can hear. The mom with the kids stops to watch. The businessman on his phone lowers his voice, peeking over. Even the teenagers stop laughing, their phones now pointed at Jake and the cop. Everyone is watching, waiting to see what happens next. Jake doesn't move. He keeps his head down, his hood still hiding his face. I'm just waiting for my flight, sir, he says. His voice is soft, almost too quiet to hear. But Officer Daniels hears it, and he doesn't like it. Oh, a flight, huh, he says, laughing in a mean way. What, are you flying to the moon? Or maybe you're going on vacation to a cardboard box somewhere. He laughs again, looking around at the crowd, expecting them to laugh with him. A few people do, but others look uncomfortable. They shift on their feet, not sure what to think. Jake stays calm. He doesn't get mad. He doesn't yell back. He just sits there, like a rock in a storm. But deep down, Jake knows something Officer Daniels doesn't. Something big. Something that will turn this whole scene upside down. What is it? What's Jake hiding under that hood? And why is he so calm, even when everyone is staring at him like he's nothing? Those are the questions that will keep you watching, because trust me, the story is just getting started. Think about this for a second. Have you ever seen someone and thought you knew everything about them, just by how they looked? Maybe you saw someone in old clothes and thought, oh, they must not have much money. Or maybe you saw someone in a fancy suit and thought, wow, they must be super important. But what if you were wrong? What if the person in the old clothes was actually a secret millionaire? Or what if the person in the suit was actually a big liar? That's the kind of story we're telling today, a story about judging people by how they look, and how wrong that can be. Hey, before we dive in, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you love stories where the underdog comes out on top, hit that subscribe button right now. Oh, and here's a question to keep you guessing: have you ever judged someone by how they look, only to be totally wrong? Drop your answer below. I'll be reading every single comment, so don't be shy. And stick around, because you won't believe what happens next in Jake's story. Is he really just a homeless guy, or is there something much bigger going on? Let's find out together. Meet Jake. That's what we'll call the man in the hoodie for now. Jake sat quietly on a cold airport bench, his hands stuffed deep into his pockets. The bench was hard and uncomfortable, but Jake didn't care. He wasn't bothering anyone. In fact, he was trying to stay invisible, like a mouse hiding in a corner. He didn't want people to notice him. He didn't want trouble. But trouble has a funny way of finding people, doesn't it? And in this busy airport, trouble was about to come stomping right up to Jake's bench. Not everyone saw Jake the way he wanted to be seen. To most people, he was just a guy in old, torn clothes. His hoodie was dirty, with frayed strings hanging down. His pants had holes, and his shoes looked like they might fall apart any second. People looked at him and thought, oh, he's just a homeless guy. He doesn't belong here. But not everyone just thought it, some people said it out loud. And one of those people was a big, loud airport cop named Officer Daniels. Enter Officer Daniels, a big, loud airport cop with a shiny badge and an even shinier ego. An ego is when someone thinks they're better than everyone else, and Officer Daniels had a huge one. He walked around the airport like he owned it. His boots made loud thumps on the floor, and his badge sparkled under the bright lights. To Officer Daniels, Jake was just a problem to be dealt with. He didn't see a person sitting on that bench. He saw someone who didn't fit in, someone who made the airport look bad. And Officer Daniels didn't like things that made his airport look bad. Hey, you! Daniels barked, stomping over to Jake's bench. His voice was so loud, it echoed off the walls. People all around stopped what they were doing to look. A lady with a rolling suitcase froze. A dad holding his little girl's hand turned his head. Even a group of kids eating ice cream stopped licking their cones to stare. You can't sit here looking like that, Officer Daniels yelled, pointing a big finger at Jake. This is a respectable place, not a shelter. People come here to catch flights, not to see bums on benches. Jake stayed calm. He didn't jump up. He didn't yell back. He kept his head down, his hood still covering most of his face. I'm just waiting for my flight, sir, he said softly. His voice was quiet, almost like a whisper. But Officer Daniels heard it, and it made him even angrier. Oh, a flight, huh, he sneered, laughing loudly so everyone nearby could hear. His laugh was mean, like a bully on the playground. What, are you flying first class to nowhere? Or maybe you're going on vacation to a dumpster? He laughed again, looking around at the crowd, expecting them to laugh with him. Some people did laugh. A few teenagers in the crowd snickered, pointing at Jake. A man in a fancy suit smirked, shaking his head. But not everyone laughed. Some people stared, their eyes wide. Others whispered to each other, their voices low. A little girl holding her dad's hand tugged on his sleeve and said, "Daddy, why is that man being so mean?" Her dad shushed her, looking embarrassed. But Jake? Jake didn't flinch. He didn't move. He just sat there, his hands still in his pockets, his head still down. It was like nothing Officer Daniels said could touch him. Like he was made of stone. Deep down, Jake knew something Officer Daniels didn't. Something big. Something huge. Something that would turn this whole scene upside down. But Jake wasn't ready to show it yet. He was waiting, watching, staying quiet. Why was he so calm? Why didn't he get mad, even when Officer Daniels was yelling right in his face? Those are the questions that make this story exciting, and trust me, the answers are coming soon. But not yet. For now, the tension was building, like a storm getting ready to break. Officer Daniels wasn't done. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over Jake. "Move it, or I'll move you myself," he shouted. His voice was so loud, it made the little girl with the ice cream drop her cone. It splattered on the floor, and she started to cry. But Officer Daniels didn't care. He crossed his arms, staring down at Jake, waiting for him to get up and leave. The crowd was watching, holding their breath. What would Jake do? Would he run away? Would he fight back? Or would he just sit there, letting Officer Daniels yell and yell? People stared. Some whispered. "Look at that guy," one lady said to her friend. "He doesn't belong here." Her friend nodded, whispering back, "Yeah, why doesn't security just kick him out?" Others looked away, embarrassed. A man in a baseball cap shook his head, muttering, "This is wrong." But no one stepped forward to help Jake. No one said, "Hey, leave him alone." They just watched, waiting to see what would happen next. It was like a show, and Jake was the star even if he didn't want to be. But here's the thing, Jake wasn't scared. Not even a little bit. Even as Officer Daniels got angrier, even as the crowd stared and whispered, Jake stayed calm. Why? Because he had a secret. A secret so big, it was like a bomb waiting to go off. A secret that would make everyone in that airport gasp. But Jake wasn't ready to use it yet. He was waiting for the right moment, the perfect time to show the world who he really was. And that moment was coming closer, closer, closer. What was Jake hiding? And why was he so calm, even as Daniels got angrier? Stick around, you won't believe what happens next. Is Jake really just a homeless guy, or is there something much, much bigger going on? Keep watching, because this story is about to take a turn you'll never expect. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when Jake finally decides he's had enough. Days earlier, Jake had made a choice. A choice to test the world around him. See, Jake wasn't just any guy. He wasn't like the travelers with their shiny suitcases or the families with their big hugs. Jake was different. Jake was special. But for now, he wanted to keep that a secret. He wanted to see how people treated someone they thought had nothing, no money, no fancy clothes, no big important job. He wanted to see if people would be kind, or if they would be mean. And boy, was he learning fast. People were not being kind. Not at all. Back at the airport, things were getting worse for Jake. Officer Daniels, the big, loud airport cop, was losing patience. He didn't like Jake sitting there on that bench, looking all poor and out of place. To Officer Daniels, Jake was a problem, like a piece of trash that needed to be thrown away. "I said move," he shouted, his voice booming through the airport. He grabbed Jake by the arm and yanked him up, hard. Jake's feet slid on the floor, and he almost fell, but he caught himself just in time. The crowd gasped. People all around stopped what they were doing to watch. A lady with a big purse put her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. A man in a red hat whispered to his wife, "Oh no, this is bad." A few people pulled out their phones, holding them up to record the scene. The little girl with the ice cream, the one who dropped her cone earlier, hid behind her dad's legs, peeking out. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Would Jake fight back? Would he run away? Or would Officer Daniels drag him out of the airport? But Jake didn't fight back. He didn't yell. He didn't even look mad. He stumbled a little when Officer Daniels yanked him, but he stood up straight again, his hands back in his pockets. "Please, sir, I have a ticket," Jake said, his voice still soft, still calm. He reached into his pocket, moving slowly, carefully. The crowd leaned in, trying to see what he was doing. What was in that pocket? Was it really a ticket, or was Jake lying to get out of trouble? Officer Daniels rolled his eyes, like he thought the whole thing was a big joke. "Oh, a ticket, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Sarcasm is when someone says one thing but means the opposite, and Officer Daniels was full of it. "Let's see this magical ticket," he said, laughing in that mean way again. He crossed his arms, waiting, sure that Jake was making it all up. The crowd waited too, some people whispering, "He's lying, right?" Others said, "No way, he has a ticket, look at him." Jake pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. It didn't look like much, just a wrinkled, dirty piece of paper, like something you'd find in the trash. He held it out to Officer Daniels, his hand steady, not shaking at all. Officer Daniels snatched it, yanking it out of Jake's hand like he was mad at the paper itself. He held it up, squinting at it, ready to laugh again. "This is going to be good," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The crowd leaned in closer, trying to see what was on the paper. Was it really a ticket? Or was it just a piece of garbage, like Officer Daniels thought? But then, something happened. Officer Daniels' face changed. Just for a second, his smirk faded. His eyes got wide, and his mouth opened a little, like he was surprised. He stared at the paper, reading it again, like he couldn't believe what he saw. "First class," he muttered, almost to himself. "First class. That's the fanciest part of the plane, where only the richest, most important people sit." The crowd heard him, and they started whispering again. "First class," one lady said. "No way," a teenager said, still holding up his phone to record. "He must have stolen it," the man in the red hat whispered to his wife. Officer Daniels shook his head, his smirk coming back, but it looked a little forced, like he was trying hard to stay mean. "This has to be fake," he said, louder this time, so everyone could hear. "There's no way a guy like you has a first-class ticket. No way." He shoved the ticket back at Jake, pushing it into his chest. Jake took it calmly, folding it up and putting it back in his pocket. Officer Daniels crossed his arms, glaring at Jake. "You stole this, didn't you?" he said, his voice full of anger. "I'm calling security to check your story. We'll see how real this ticket is." The crowd was buzzing now, like a hive of bees. People were talking, pointing, whispering. "He stole it, I bet," one lady said. "Yeah, look at his clothes," a man said. "No way, he's first class." But a few people weren't so sure. The little girl with the ice cream tugged on her dad's sleeve again. "Daddy, what if he's telling the truth?" she asked, her voice small. Her dad shushed her, but he looked at Jake, his eyes narrowing, like he was starting to wonder. Jake just stood there, his hood still up, his face still hidden. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't try to explain. He just waited, calm as ever. Why was he so calm? Why didn't he fight back, even when Officer Daniels was calling him a thief in front of everyone? What did Jake know that no one else did? Those are the questions that make the story so exciting, and trust me, the answers are coming soon. But not yet. For now, the suspense was building, like a balloon getting bigger and bigger, ready to pop. Was Jake lying? Or was there more to this quiet man than anyone realized? What would security find when they dug deeper? Keep watching, the truth is closer than you think. Is Jake really a thief, or is he hiding something huge, something that will make everyone in that airport gasp? Stick around, because the story is about to take a turn you'll never expect. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Things were getting wild at the airport. Officer Daniels, the big, loud cop, was sure he had Jake all figured out. He thought Jake was a liar, a thief, maybe even a troublemaker. He thought Jake didn't belong in a fancy airport with clean floors and shiny suitcases. But now, security was coming. Officer Daniels had called them to check Jake's story, sure that they would prove the ticket was fake. The crowd was watching, holding their breath. People were whispering, pointing, waiting to see what would happen next. Would Jake get in trouble? Would he get kicked out? Or was something else about to happen, something huge? The airport security team arrived, walking fast through the crowd. They were led by a stern woman named Captain Lopez. Stern means serious, and Captain Lopez looked very serious. She had a tablet in her hand, and her uniform was crisp and clean, with a shiny badge just like Officer Daniels. But Captain Lopez wasn't loud like him. She was calm, in control, like someone who knew exactly what to do. She walked right up to Officer Daniels and held out her hand. "Let me see the ticket," she said, her voice firm but not mean. Officer Daniels handed over the crumpled piece of paper, smirking a little, like he was sure Captain Lopez would agree with him. "It's fake, I'm telling you," he said, crossing his arms. "This guy's a liar. Look at him." Captain Lopez didn't say anything. She just took the ticket and smoothed it out on her tablet. Then she scanned it, using a little red light on her tablet to read the code. The crowd watched, leaning in, trying to see what would happen. The tablet beeped, and Captain Lopez's eyebrows shot up, high on her forehead. "This ticket is real," she said, looking at Jake with new interest. "It's a first-class ticket, paid in full." The crowd gasped. People started whispering, their voices buzzing like bees. "First class," one lady said, her eyes wide. "No way," a teenager said, holding up his phone to record. "I told you he stole it," the man in the red hat said, pointing at Jake. Officer Daniels laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh, it was a nervous one, like he wasn't so sure anymore. "Real? Come on, that's impossible," he said, shaking his head. "There's no way a guy like him has a first-class ticket. No way." Captain Lopez didn't laugh. She looked at Jake, her eyes narrowing, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. "But we need to verify your identity," she said. "Verify means to check, to make sure something is true." "Name, please," she said, holding up her tablet, ready to type. The crowd got quiet, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was watching Jake, waiting to see what he would say. Would he lie? Would he run? Or would he tell the truth? Jake took a deep breath, standing up straight. He didn't look scared. He didn't look nervous. He looked strong, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Then, slowly, very slowly, he reached up and pulled off his hood. The crowd went silent. His face, clean-shaven, sharp, and confident, didn't match the torn clothes at all. His hair was neat, not messy. His eyes were bright, not tired. He didn't look like a homeless guy anymore. He looked like someone important, someone powerful. The crowd stared, their mouths open, not sure what to think. "My name," Jake said clearly, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "is Jacob Ellis." His words echoed through the airport, like a thunderclap on a quiet day. The crowd stayed silent, but you could feel the shock, like a big wave crashing over everyone. Jacob Ellis? Who was that? Why did that name sound familiar? Captain Lopez's jaw dropped, her tablet almost slipping out of her hand. "Jacob Ellis," she said, her voice shaking a little, "as in the Jacob Ellis. The tech billionaire who vanished from the public eye 2 years ago." The crowd exploded in whispers, like a firecracker going off. "Jacob Ellis," one lady said, her hand over her mouth. "The guy who invented those smart cars," a man said, his eyes wide. "The billionaire who disappeared," a teenager said, still recording on his phone. Everyone knew the name Jacob Ellis. He was famous, super famous, like a movie star or a superhero. He was one of the richest people in the world, a man who made computers and cars that could think for themselves. But 2 years ago, he vanished. No one knew where he went. And now, here he was, standing in an airport, dressed in torn clothes. Officer Daniels laughed nervously, his face turning red. "Billionaire? This guy? Come on, that's ridiculous," he said, shaking his head. But Captain Lopez wasn't laughing. She pulled up a photo on her tablet, a picture of Jacob Ellis from a magazine. She held it up next to Jake's face, comparing them. The crowd leaned in, trying to see. The hair, the eyes, the sharp jaw, it was a perfect match. There was no doubt about it. The man in the torn clothes, the man Officer Daniels called a liar and a thief, was Jacob Ellis, the tech billionaire. The crowd erupted in whispers, their voices buzzing louder and louder. Phones were out again, but this time, they weren't filming Officer Daniels, they were filming Jake. "It's really him," one lady shouted. "I can't believe it," a man said, shaking his head. The little girl with the ice cream peeked out from behind her dad, her eyes wide. "Daddy, is he a superhero?" she asked, her voice small. Her dad didn't answer, he was too shocked to speak. Jake turned to Officer Daniels, his voice steady but strong, like a lion waking up. "You judged me by my clothes," "Officer," he said, looking right into Daniel's eyes. "You thought I was nothing. But let me tell you something, I've been traveling the world like this for 2 years, testing people's kindness. Or, in your case, their cruelty. I wanted to see how people treat someone they think has nothing. And guess what? I record everything." Jake tapped a small camera hidden in his jacket, a tiny black dot no one had noticed. "This footage is going straight to my team. And trust me, they'll make sure the world sees it." Officer Daniels' face went pale, like all the color drained out of it. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The crowd cheered, clapping and shouting, like they were at a big game and their team just won. "Yeah, you tell him," one man shouted. "That's what you get," a lady yelled. The little girl with the ice cream clapped her hands, smiling big. But the story isn't over yet. Stick around to see what happens next. What will happen to Officer Daniels? And what will Jake do now that everyone knows who he really is? Keep watching, because this story is about to get even better. After Jake showed everyone who he really was, things happened fast. Really fast. Remember that little camera hidden in Jake's jacket? The one that recorded everything Officer Daniels did? Well, Jake sent that video to his team, and within hours, it went viral. Viral means it spread all over the internet, like a wildfire. People everywhere watched it on their phones, on their computers, on their TVs. News stations picked up the story, and big headlines flashed on screens: "Billionaire Jacob Ellis exposes airport cops' cruelty." Everyone was talking about it. Everyone wanted to know more. The airport bosses saw the video, and they were not happy. Not happy at all. They issued a public apology, which means they said sorry to everyone. They said, "We are sorry for what happened. This is not how we want our airport to be." And Officer Daniels? Oh, he got in big trouble. The airport suspended him without pay, which means he couldn't work and didn't get any money while they investigated what he did. Investigate means to look into something carefully, to find out the truth. Officer Daniels had to go home, sit down, and think about what he did wrong. But Jake wasn't done. Not even close. The next day, he held a press conference. A press conference is when someone important talks to a bunch of reporters with cameras and microphones. Jake stood tall in a sharp suit, his torn clothes long gone. He looked strong, powerful, like a king standing in front of his people. "This isn't just about me," he said to the cameras, his voice clear and loud. "This is about every person who's ever been judged, ignored, or mistreated because of how they look. I'm starting a foundation to help the homeless, and I'm funding it with $100 million of my own money. A foundation is like a big group that helps people, and $100 million is a lot of money, more than you could ever count." The crowd at the airport that day learned a hard lesson. The people who had stared at Jake, who had whispered mean things, who had laughed with Officer Daniels, they all felt bad now. They clapped and cheered for Jake, shouting, "Good job, and you're amazing." Captain Lopez, the serious security lady, shook Jake's hand, smiling for the first time. "We'll make changes," she promised. "From now on, security will treat everyone the same, no matter what they look like." And Officer Daniels? Well, let's just say he'd think twice before judging someone again. He learned that being mean can cost you a lot, like your job, your respect, and your shiny badge. As Jake boarded his first-class flight, he looked out at the world below and smiled. The plane was big and shiny, with soft seats and bright lights, not like the hard, cold bench he sat on in the airport. He was leaving behind all the stares, all the whispers, all the mean words from Officer Daniels and the crowd. But he wasn't leaving behind a lesson. No way. Jake had learned something big, and he wanted everyone else to learn it too. He wanted the world to change, to be better, to be kinder. Think about this for a minute. Sometimes, the person you least expect holds the most power. Jake looked like a homeless guy, right? He had torn clothes, dirty shoes, and a hood hiding his face. People thought he was nothing, just a problem to be pushed away. But Jake wasn't nothing. Jake was Jacob Ellis, a billionaire, a genius, a man who could do amazing things. He had more power than anyone in that airport, even Officer Daniels with his shiny badge. And that's the thing, power doesn't always look like you think it will. It doesn't always wear a suit or carry a badge. Sometimes, it hides in torn clothes, waiting for the right moment to shine. And those who judge by appearances? They're the ones who never see it coming. Officer Daniels looked at Jake and thought, oh, he's just a nobody. The crowd looked at Jake and thought, oh, he doesn't belong here. But they were wrong, so wrong. They judged Jake by his clothes, not by who he really was. And because of that, they got a big surprise, a surprise that made them feel silly and ashamed. So, next time you pass someone on the street, remember Jake's story. Don't look at their clothes or their shoes or their hair. Look at their eyes, their smile, their heart. Be kind. Be fair. Because you never know who you're really talking to. That person might be a billionaire, a hero, or just someone who needs a friend. And kindness is free, it doesn't cost a thing. Jake's story teaches us something big, something important. It teaches us to think before we judge. It teaches us to help, not hurt. It teaches us to be brave, to stand up for people, even if they look different from us. So, let's make a promise, okay? Let's promise to be kind, every day, to everyone. Let's promise to remember Jake and his secret power. Because if we do, the world will be a better place, a happier place, a place where no one feels small or invisible. Hey, what did you think of Jake's story? Drop a comment below. Would you have stood up for him, or would you have walked by? Tell me the truth, I want to know. And if this story inspired you, hit that like button and share it with a friend. Let's spread kindness everywhere, okay? Until next time, keep being kind, keep being awesome, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.